No game looks like this. No game plays like this. But what's more shocking is this game came out years ago. But it's more than just a dead game. It's Ubisoft's dead masterpiece. A masterpiece, subject to die a cold, dark death in this snow. But why? What happened to The Division? Well, that's the question I tried to answer. A lot of the time in the gaming world, if it's too good to be true, it's probably not gonna happen. The story of Tom Clancy's The Division and its development starts with E3 2013. Its reception was quite good, but there were dissenting voices who said that it was fake. And 3 years later, we were let down. Those dissenting voices saying it was too good to be true were right. The actual execution of the game came with the fidelity downgrade, which ultimately wasn't the issue with The Division. In fact, that's the least of the game's problems. Had it not been for the game's immersive qualities, it may not have had the staying power that it did have. Ultimately, the game still looks really good, even if the marketing version of the game wasn't quite what we ended up with. Ubisoft would of course become infamous for this tactic, with numerous E3 press conferences. Still, the visuals that were here were compelling. The Division took place in a ran-down New York City that's been plunged into gunfight-dotted skirmishes and general unrest. But it's not because of enemy invasion or a nuclear apocalypse. A deadly flu has spread throughout and left the city in a warlike state. Federal and local level responses have only been able to do so much about the situation. Your player character is a normal person at face value, but in reality, they're a member of a highly embedded and classified organization called the Division, sent in to dish out some tactically delivered responses to the crisis. Sometimes the game does a great job of selling this. Sometimes the game does a terrible job of selling this. From 2016 to today, and until Kingdom Come, people will point out the Division's bullet spongy enemies. The game has a tactical aesthetic around it, but the gunplay is anything but. The crazy part is that when you ignore the bullet hosing, the game actually could come together with somewhat tactically cinematic sequences. I made an actual effort to take these guys down as quickly as possible by using my magic scanny thing.
Warning. Incoming hostiles.
Oh, get off, damn it! Fucking dumbass!
After this, I remember thinking, if the rest of the game is like this, it should be pretty fun. So then I tried to go for a quick takedown just to see what would happen. And therein lies the issue. It's not that I dislike bullet-hosey third-person shooters. I thought about it more. I felt like I was being too harsh. And then I realized, the reason that it felt strange to me is that the bullet-hosey mechanic feels really arcadey. But the game itself, and the world that I'm in, doesn't feel arcadey. I'm constantly yo-yoing back and forth between some of the best atmospheric art I've ever experienced and Sandra Bullock's The A-Team.
Shit, they're behind us!
You see, the game was made by Ubisoft, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it was set up for failure. I enjoyed Watch Dogs, but Watch Dogs wasn't built from the ground up for its shooting mechanics. Watch Dogs was about the environment interactions. The Division was something completely different. In theory, it was competing with Destiny, a mainstream looter shooter, and that meant that your blue AK-47 was better than your green MP5. When the Division tells me this does this, I understand that. I understand that it's telling me that, but this is the game I thought it was going to be so many years ago, and it's clear why a lot of people got burnt by it. Trying to make these kinds of RPG mechanics work in a shooter space is very difficult to do. Because in an RPG, it makes sense that I have to hit the dragon a million times with a sword. In a shooter game, it does not make sense that I have to shoot the big guy 5 million times because he's big and his name's Vinny. Nevertheless, the Division insists that he is big and his name is Vinny, so I must shoot him 1 million times in order to defeat him. Fair enough. But this, in my opinion, was one of the Division's biggest problems. Not because the design was bad, but because the Division's target audience was just not the right pick for this sort of game. Aside from this, the Division suffered from a number of different problems. Bad quest design, bugs, the endgame content was non-existent in the base game, and it wasn't clear what kind of game it was until you played it. Again, hearkening to the marketing issues. 6 months later, the game was empty, quiet, and cold. But maybe there was some light in the dark. DLC added a lot to the game and addressed multiple issues, but it might have been a little bit too late. The game had a huge launch, and then it had record-setting player count loss. A small gesture did bring back a portion of the player base, but the damage had been done already. So by the time the second update came out, there was seldom a player left to experience it. All the DLCs were quite good though, and received well. Ubisoft tried their best to provide ongoing support. In classic Ubisoft fashion though, the game had been effectively killed. But what's interesting is that among those who stayed behind and played the game, they got to experience something that nobody else did. The first extraction shooter. In the outskirts lay the Dark Zone, a PvP environment where you had to extract to get gear. Here, friendly agents could turn on you at the flip of a hat, adding a sense of general unease and a sort of Wild West vibe. But the game was an RPG first, and an FPS game second. So if you had great gear, you could just bully anybody who was lower leveled in this area, and come out on top every single time. The idea behind the Dark Zone was interesting, but the gameplay execution left a lot to be desired. The Dark Zone was great in concept, terrible in execution. It was plagued with glitches, hackers, and numerous other things that made it inhospitable. The Dark Zone continued to be an integral part of the Division's gameplay loop, but one of the Division's best pieces of content would turn out to be another risk-taking venture from Ubisoft. Except this time, it actually worked. In the survival mode, you had nothing. You had sepsis, you had an hour to live, and no clear direction of where to go. Your objective was just to get out. You had intense moments at the brink of death constantly. And this is already a more compelling storyline than nearly any extraction shooter available on the market these days. In Tarkov, you're a nobody versus nobody. In Warzone, you're a Call of Duty character dressed like Homelander. In The Division, you're a government agent left to die, with nothing but your survival skills and a time limit. They should have launched it alongside the base game. And on its own, survival is worth the $10 price tag. Supposedly, Ubisoft could take the lessons they learned from the good parts of this game and develop it into something even better.
In the game is just looking for doors, because you know that's where the enemies are going to spawn.
What happened? You had a good formula. You had to iron out the kinks, but it could have been good. Well, based off of the little bit of the Division I've played, I think it's gotten to do with vibe.
I either lost my glasses or I'm really fucking drunk. Give me that.
Screw you!
My kid needs food.
Not my problem!
Vibe is a difficult argument to make. It's synonymous with sauce. Sauce is another difficult argument to make about something in an objective way. It's not something you can really define. It's a timeless quality, the artistic quality of something that makes it stand out. Its uniqueness, if you will. I don't feel like constantly sprinting around the environment because just strolling through it at a comfortable pace feels more immersive. It's not a pretty sight. It's a rundown city that's been torn up by war. And I still want to look at it. I think the fact this game was set during Christmas really captures the unsettling shock value of the whole thing. Christmas is supposed to be the least depressing time of the year, and this is about as depressing as you can get. And the torn up environments say something about the writing of this world. Clean energy buses that were advertised with the mission of helping avert climate change were briefly used in an emergency situation before being abandoned in the snow. Every vehicle in New York is abandoned. Police cars, fire trucks, regular sedans. It feels like the city of New York has been put in an hourglass tilted on the side. The constant hustle and bustle of the Christmas season suddenly stopped dead in its tracks. Time has stopped moving except for the occasional bits of gunfire and distressed shouting, and the whistle of the wind. Walk long enough and you may hear a Christmas song on the radio. Civilians call out to you from their houses in the streets. Sometimes they warn you of danger ahead. Sometimes they tell you you're part of the problem. The world of The Division is moody, atmospherically rich. It makes you think a lot about your own environment. I just wish I had a tack shooter to go along with it. The gameplay immediately jolts you out of the atmosphere the game was doing such a good job of conveying. It has a constant yo-yo effect of enrapturing you in a thoughtful piece of immersive art, broken up intermittently with Ubisoft-isms. And the combat is particularly at odds with the environment the game is trying to convey. The Division does a good job of trying to build up the systems in the war zone of New York in a way that feels plausible and authentic. The DHS deploys field guys who set up forward operating bases, hospitals, power supplies, everything that civilization would allocate to something like this. But in typical video gamerino fashion, you, the main character, are surrounded by robotic people that can't do a lot more than say dialogue at you.
You're a Division agent, huh? Great. Now, don't dwell on all the death and carnage around you, or the fact that so many have tried to do what you're about to attempt and failed and died what surely must have been a horrible death. Sure, it was worth it. Now, so what?
The green JTF guys are just kind of there and don't add much to your combat encounters, because you're going to have to do the bulk of the work anyway.
We'll hold here to cover your back.
You hose down one guy, you get in cover somewhere else, and hose down another guy. Hose down that guy, get in cover, reload, hose down that guy. Gears of War did this a long time ago with the cover system to alleviate a disadvantage of aiming on the janky controller tech of the Xbox 360 era. And that's fine, but I can't help but think if they had just tried to commit to the bit a long time ago, it might have aged a lot better. Yet every janky gunfight I got in, I could forgive, because the world was just so cool. One of the coolest parts about this open world design is the comm chatter relative to your cursor position on the map. Sometimes some character seeps through the cracks of the Division in the form of pretty good voice acting.
You boys got 100 yards clean count numbers for phase 2? 263 confirmed infected, 47 possible, currently asymptomatic. Copy. 263 infected, 47 possible.
The cleaners were particularly compelling, and in my opinion, or at least best estimation, pretty realistic for what they were. They're organized. They have clear lines of communication, plans, chains of command, all operating with a particular set of tasks. Keep peeling back the curtain, and you see pretty decent writing and world building here. That's quite honestly in the sweet spot of theatrics combined with authenticity that a Clancy novel is known for. Don't get it twisted. The game still suffers from Ubisoft dialogue-isms.
Look, I don't do sentimental, but you got me out of a jam there, so thanks. But I know you want more from me than just warm fuzzies for saving my sorry ass. Like getting this shithole up to par. Oh, government standard. Okay, I can work with this. You've actually got some skills, you know?
Bro, I hit a button.
Holy crap, you just made me the happiest grouch in this place. Central heating. Consistent heat. You're gonna make a lot of friends with this one.
Thanks, Paul. I'm aware that central heating means consistent heat. Look, I don't have a problem with the general gist of what the characters are saying, but it's in this weird uncanny valley area of, oh, I'm voice acting for a video game character. A more realistic kind of dialogue quip for this guy would have been, "Thank the Lord, I was freezing my fucking nuts off." Ubisoft games, especially in this time period, had this tendency to over-embellish or yap-sesh their way through each scene. A lot of times, it just comes off as very video gamey, in the same stereotypical way that you might make fun of quippy Marvel dialogue that was representative of the time period in which this game came out. Nothing's really left to breathe. People don't casually go from one conversation to the next. Each conversation has a forced 3-act structure. In the middle of an op, one of the characters makes the same prom dress joke 3 times. Like, the first time, it was like, and then she keeps saying it.
Over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, the covalent bonds break down, and the double helix starts unzipping like a cheap prom dress. No crispy edges. Crispy means heat, means off comes the prom dress.
Hey, Doc, that's not really appropriate for the op. Name's Agent Agenson.
Agent McAgent told me you're the best of the best.
Feeling pretty god, that's true. We've been getting our asses kicked out here for months. Got bad guys crawling all over the place. The first good guys got killed by the bad guys.
The Division is at its best when you sit back and take in its immersive qualities. One thing I really enjoyed about The Division was how well the graphics engine could handle weather effects. Every kind of weather pattern you may be familiar with in reality is a one-to-one copy here. When the sun is out, a golden brightness seems to flare up against the white and now recently melting layer of snow caked all over the street. It transports me to the sharpness of cold air broken up by warm clothes, the tender bite of cold wind against my face, and the smell of ozone as the sky starts thawing the wintry mix on the ground. Likewise, when a snowstorm strikes, the quiet stillness of gentle white falling on top of everything is only occasionally broken up by the crunch of footsteps and the chaos of the urban struggles you hear in the distance. When the gameplay bored the heck out of me, it didn't really matter because the world map was just so freaking captivating to explore that I couldn't put it down. Sometimes the gameplay actually does work, even if it is broken up by unintentionally funny sequences where bad guys are bad because they're wearing snapbacks and walking like wide Putin while going, "Nobody gonna tell me what to do again." Try this one on. Shit! Grenade! Ah! Look what the cat dragged in. You think you're tough? Look what the cat dragged in.
So that's why we gotta hold the line against anyone. And I don't care if they say they're from the government. You know they're lying. We stop them here, we can still save the city, we can still save the world.
I don't think The Division is a perfect game. It doesn't have the best gunplay, it doesn't have the best looting, but what it does have in spades, in spite of that, is personality. This game has a ton of personality, and it seeps through everywhere you go. Does the game have janky mechanics? Oh yeah. But for some strange reason, I just have a compulsion to keep exploring the war-torn streets of New York. And I have a feeling everybody else who played the game before me felt the same way.
Dispatch to JTF Patrol. We've got a flash incoming.